Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. We are so excited to have you listening to our podcast, but did you know that we're also on YouTube? We would love for you to check us out there and hit subscribe, plus also like this video. That really helps us out. And then you can learn about all the upcoming episodes when you subscribe and get notifications. Now, today we're continuing our conversation on Type 3s, and we're going to actually interview two Type 3s today. Now, Type 3s share the same core motivations and EIP parts, but we can't put all Type 3s in the same box, which you're going to be able to see and hear from the unique stories of these two Type 3s today, and how their EIP parts show up in different ways.
You can learn more about EIP in episode 112. If you want to learn more about EIP applied to Type 3s, you can go back to episode 125. But before we begin, Beth, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about what is the acronym that we're using, EIP?
Yeah, so it stands for Enneagram Internal Profile. And what we really want to focus on with this is that God focuses on our heart condition, right? He's not consumed with the outward behaviors, but the heart condition. And we want to use the Enneagram in a way that shows us whether our heart is aligned or misaligned with the truth of the gospel. And so with that, we use EIP to help us to understand the various parts of our heart. Now, your main type is composed of two parts. You have the misaligned wounded child part and the gospel-led beloved child part of yourself. Now, your type has four connecting types to it. So you have your two wings. Those are the two numbers on either side of your main type. And you have two more types that are connected by those lines that you see on this symbol, like right here. And to find your Enneagram paths, you just have your main type and you look at the two lines and the numbers that they're connected to. So your wings and your Enneagram paths are the four connecting types that comprise of the rest of your EIP. Now, each of these parts can either show up in your life on a daily basis or in circumstances either aligned or misaligned. And when your wounded child is trying to lead your whole self, well, it's going to bring less healthy tendencies, which can negatively affect you and your relationships, because our wounded child is this younger part of our heart. And if you were just to think about a young child trying to drive a car or a bus, we really don't want that to happen. They're ill-equipped for that. And so when our wounded child is trying to lead us, it's just not going to go as well. And so we want to use self-awareness so that we can learn when this part shows up, and then also to surrender, depend, and ask the Holy Spirit to help us so that our beloved child who will awaken, show up, and lead all the parts of our heart. Because the beloved child is the part of us that is aligned with the truth of the gospel. It knows who they are and whose they are. And when the beloved child shows up, we see the fruits of the Spirit show up, which are joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And this is so important for us to recognize when our wounded child is more active or is our beloved child leading. And that's really what we're going to focus in on.
Well, today on the episode, we have two guests. First off is Neal Samudre, who is our Chief Marketing Officer here at Your Enneagram Coach. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Neal.
Yeah, well, I'm Neal. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Your Enneagram Coach, and I am also the co-founder of a company called EnjoyCo with my wife, who is a Type 2 therapist. We founded this company, EnjoyCo. It's an emotional health and wellness company, and we do therapy. But we, as you mentioned, we have some exciting stuff coming out. We have a book coming out January 3rd, 2023, called Start From Joy. And it's really details an emotionally healthy approach to positive change, one without shame, guilt, and fear. So we're really excited about coming out with that book. It's kind of crazy that I'm a Type 3 here talking about emotions and diving into the internal self. But that's what gets me up in the morning. I love talking about emotions and self-awareness.
Now, was that always the case, or was this more of that aha, new, healthier journey that you've been on?
Definitely the latter. It is the product of a journey towards health for me. As
Yes.
we'll probably talk about in this conversation, I was living in a lot of the misaligned part of my type 3 where it was very unhealthy, just um, really didn't acknowledge emotions at all. I really see it as a full circle part of me that now I have another company that is all about emotions and
Yeah.
Mhm.
therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you here, Neal. Now, so I want to introduce a dear friend of mine, Dr. Alison Cook. Alison is the co-author of one of my favorite books called Boundaries for Your Soul, which greatly influenced our work with EIP. We'll go more into that later, but she's also releasing her new upcoming book, The Best of You, which I already got the privilege of reading ahead of time. And I got to tell you, it is just as amazing as the first book, and every woman needs this book. So, men out there, sorry, it is mainly for women, but go ahead and buy it for your wife. Go online, order it. You will not regret it. It meant so much to me to read it. I know I told Jeff, like, every day I was reading it, like, I can't put this down. It resonates so much with me. And that's how I felt about Boundaries for Your Soul. In fact, I read Boundaries for Your Soul with like at least a couple of friends several times. So, Alison, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us about this new upcoming book and all that you're doing.
Thanks, Beth. Your work, it's funny the synergy we've discovered between our stories, our work, and we discovered it through reading each other's books before we knew each other,
Yeah.
which is such a really beautiful, neat way that I think God works. So
Yeah.
I'm a psychologist, and my specialty is bringing together faith with psychology. And so I work primarily with women, but trying to kind of bring the two together, not in the way that I went through graduate school and kind of developed my own thinking was like they had to be separate. Here's the church side of me, and then here's the psychologist in me. And wait a minute, can't these two things go together? Can't I figure out how to know and love God and also figure out as an Enneagram 3, which is really hard, how to know myself deeply.
Sure.
Um, and so the first book, The Boundaries for Your Soul, that you mentioned, was a faith integration of a model of therapy called IFS that just brought it together for me. So like how we are complex being, how we have these different parts, that I love what you guys are doing with the EIP, how we get to know ourselves on a deep level in partnership with God's Spirit. And then the second book grew out a lot with, I primarily work with women these past 20 years, and just so many of the common themes that I see show up in women's lives, and just trying to create a sort of really accessible, almost like a therapy in a book, if you just to kind of walk through some of these key themes and ideas in a story driven way about how we heal and how we grow and become the people God wants us to become. So I have that the writing has been a really wonderful way to supplement the practice of working with people individually.
Yeah. Well, it's been a joy to get to know you as a dear friend. And then we've also done a few things like with AACC. We've done some workshops and stuff
Yep.
together. So we have a lot of overlapping skills and desires and passions that it's just been an honor. Because when I read the book, Boundaries for Your Soul, I was reading it going, she and Kimberly Miller have got to know the Enneagram. I heard the Enneagram kind of like secretly woven throughout, and I had to reach out to you, and I did, and you were like, yes, we actually wanted to put a chapter of the Enneagram in there, but it was so back in the day before it was real popular that
Yeah.
the publishers didn't feel like people would get it or understand it. And I was like, oh man. So that's when you and I kind of struck up that friendship when
We
we kind
love
of got together.
Yeah, I love the Enneagram. And we would, when we were writing that book, like when we would think through the examples, we'd think about what's an example for a type 1, for a type 2. So the fact that you picked that up,
Mhm.
because we didn't name it, but we tried
Yes.
to make sure we accounted for each of the different types so that every person, every type would be like, yeah, I really at least relate. And you just completely were like, wait a minute, that's the Enneagram in
Yes.
there. Yeah, yeah.
Here's the great thing about what's going to happen during this episode and talking with both Neal and Alison. Alison, your book came in at a critical point in our life. I have been dabbling in IFS in my own personal work after a significant event happening in my life as a pastor within the local church. And so it was so valuable to be able to read that. And then, as you're aware, we've been passing it around to friends ever since. And then even for Neal, just this week before the podcast, we've got some big decisions to make. And I just shared with our executive team, hey, I'm feeling a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. I'm not wanting to sabotage our efforts, but I want to hear more. And Neal created space for me. And so this is the gift of the three. Yep. There is the stereotypical three that's like, let's get things done, make the decisions, be efficient, and check off the list.
And get rid of your emotions, just go.
And then there are profound, very deep, meaningful threes who have done their work, and other people flourish around them. And so we are thrilled to be able to speak with you both today, get some insights on EIP and how your different parts show up. And then so that it can help our other threes and people who have threes in their life and love them.
Yep.
And want to benefit from those relationships.
Yeah.
So, Bethy, why don't you give us a brief reminder about just an overview of a type 3?
Yeah, I'd love to. So type 3s, they're optimistic. They're very accomplished and can be adaptable, changing with whatever needs to happen. They're just really good at adapting. They excel, they achieve, and they reach ambitious goals with ease and confidence. Now, however, in our fast-paced and comparison-driven society, it feels like there's limitless opportunities. And so they're going to feel this burden to continue to drive and reach higher and higher goals so that others can see it, because they believe that they must be successful in every area of life and for people to see it so that they can be admired. And so they're living under this constant pressure to appear successful and to impress the people that are around them so that others can measure their worth by their external achievement. Now, their main focus of attention is on accomplishing tasks and goals so that they can gain that recognition, status, value, approval, and admiration from others. So that's going to be their just typical go-to focus of attention. Therefore, they are going to focus on what needs to happen and how they need to adapt to appear successful and to gain that admiration from others. Now, they have a ton of strengths, and we're only going to highlight just a few, but they are, again, very optimistic. They can be friendly and upbeat. They're very hard workers and good providers. They're also incredible cheerleaders. They see what people need to do, and they help pave the path for them in that way. They also have the ability to recover from setbacks and to bring up some confidence to move forward to achieve the next goal. Now, they are competent, they work efficiently, and they get a ton done. I mean, a ton. It's truly remarkable what type 3s can get done. Now, as we know, the core motivations are the driving force behind why any of us think, feel, and behave. So we want to focus on the type 3's core motivations. Now, their main type, their core motivations, they never change. But we're also going to dive into their EIP parts and how those influence their main type. But again, it's their main type's core motivations that are the driving force. So the type 3's core motivations are the core fear, which is being exposed or thought as incompetent, inefficient, worthless, also a failing or appearing unsuccessful. They are just trying to avoid those things at all cost. But they have a core desire, and that's having high status and respect, being admired by others, being successful and valuable. But their core weakness is deceit. Now, deceit here in the Enneagram, what it's really talking about is that they're deceiving themselves into believing that they're only the image they present to others. So you're going to find them embellishing the truth by putting on a polished persona or putting on achieving masks for others and themselves to see so that others will admire them. But they have a core longing. Now, this is the message their heart longs to hear, and it's to hear you are loved and valued for simply being you.
Well, Neal, let's start with you. Tell us about that first moment when you realized, oh, I'm definitely a 3. What was it about the description of a 3 that really resonated with you?
Well, I'll talk about the specific moment I found out about the Enneagram and that I was a type 3. I took, I believe it was your assessment maybe several years ago.
Yeah, I mean, why dabble with the rest when you can go to the best?
YourEnneagramCoach.com.
That's awesome.
Good plug.
That 9 humble brag.
I'm just pulling in my 3.
I was gonna say, done like a 3.
Really, I was doing my job as the chief marketing officer. I was plugging our
Good job,
assessment.
Neal. Good
That's
job.
what I was
You get a
doing there.
Starbucks card this month.
But anyways, I took this assessment and found out I was a type 3, and I read the description, and it highlighted so much of my internal struggle. I actually, back in the day, went to counseling to work through a lot of my misaligned parts of my type 3. And we talked about me being a type 3, and my therapist was like, that makes total sense. A lot of what I was dealing with back then was I was struggling under the weight of my ambition and what I felt like I had to do in order to matter and prove that I was worthy in the world. And it was burning me out. And so I was in therapy. And really, my therapist, once he found out I was a type 3, did the work to help me divorce my worth from my accomplishments and help me put down this mask that I so readily put on in different scenarios to prove that I was successful, that I mattered, that I was making a worthy contribution. So all that to say, finding out that I was a type 3 just made so much sense with a lot of the internal struggles I had been having. And when I found it out, it was just a game changer.
Oh, that's awesome, Neal. Thanks for sharing that. Alison, tell us about, when did you find out, like, oh yeah, I'm definitely.
My journey to embracing that was challenging. And so for a long time, when I first discovered the Enneagram, I thought that I was a type 2, and I was very sure and proud of that. And I even knew how to kind of take the tests to make sure I came out
Oh,
as a
Sure.
type 2.
Yeah.
I hadn't discovered your test yet. But
The best test.
right. But so it was a process, and 3 things happened, and it was through that first year of when Boundaries for Your Soul came out. It wasn't that long ago, where it's a process of 3 things. One, realizing I like, and people around me being like, I don't think you're a 2. I show up like a 2,
Sure.
but as a woman, that's a coping strategy I use. That's how I wanted people to see me.
Sure.
I feel as a woman, it's more acceptable, especially in faith communities, to show up as a 2, right? So I worked my 3 part, worked really hard
Yes.
to make sure I
Yes.
appear. That was the way I was managing my image. And so when that all began to kind of break through, was 3 things. One, I began to realize my core drive isn't so much, or core fear isn't rejection. In fact, I'm often kind of trying to get people going and then move on. I'm not, that wasn't it. Looking back at my childhood, realizing where are my wounds, it's all around failure. It was not making the basketball team. It was not performing well. These are the deep-seated wounds that lingered, right? They weren't around rejections, and I had many rejections,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. It was
Yeah.
like, no, but that wasn't what hurt.
Yeah.
That wasn't what cut me. And then third, a group of women, I was in a small group, said to me, because I said, but the thing that doesn't fit is I'm not trying to always magnify myself. I'm not always trying to make myself
Sure.
better. But they said, isn't it also deception to always try to diminish yourself? And I was like, oh,
Yikes.
because that, right? Ding, I was like, because they did like little things like I didn't tell anybody I was writing a book because, that didn't fit this image of myself as this humble helper, right? And so that really, and so then I went and I took a test. I think it probably was your test, not that we're trying to, but it was one that was, I think, where you guys
Oh, but
give
we
you the
are.
whole
No.
picture, right? Yeah, it's
Mhm.
not just like you're this, you give the whole picture. And then at the end, I think it's your test where you have to choose
Yes.
between, and it was very much clear. And it really was a Holy Spirit led process because it was painful. I had shame. I had a lot of shaming messages around ambition, a lot of shaming messages about a woman who loves to work. I love to work.
Yeah.
It's been so fun to embrace it. It's so freeing. But I do think there's a gender thing there for me in particular where, and just some of my childhood messages where to embrace that really meant to have to get to the root of being being gentle with that 3 part of myself
Right.
and embracing her, and that 2 wing is still there. But I love what you guys are doing. I love this conversation about then what does when you know yourself, when you get to the root of that, then you are free to become the healthier version of yourself instead of hiding behind this image. In my case, this mask that I had created that wasn't grandiose, but was similarly still rooted in that little bit of deception of I'm trying to make you think I'm somebody that I'm not, that isn't
Yeah.
totally really who I am.
Oh, that's
Love
beautiful.
that.
Well, why don't we dive in? We're going to first talk about the one part of our EIP, which is the wounded child. Beth, why don't you talk about the wounded child and a brief description of what that would look like for a type 3?
So, as a child, the type 3s longed to hear, "You are loved for simply being you." But they grew up believing that others would only love them if they were successful, valuable, and admired. To them, second place was absolutely losing, which was unacceptable. So, their wounded child part falsely believes that receiving love is totally dependent on success and image management. But this part of their heart longs to be authentic, to be real, and to finally be able to rest from this constant pursuit of winning and achieving. And as an adult, they still have the core longing that you are loved for simply being you.
Great. So I'd love to hear either of you can go first here. This is probably the most tender part of our conversation on the podcast to talk about this wounded part of yourself. But one, how have you related to that part of your life? Did it live sort of in denial as if it didn't exist? And then what woke you up to it, and what was that experience like?
Well, I feel like I definitely notice when the wounded child comes up in me. I think I've told you guys this before, but in my health, I don't really relate to a lot of the 3. I know I'm a type 3, but I really resonate with parts of the type 9 in my health. And which is interesting. That's another conversation. But I always know that I'm a type 3 whenever I get shame triggered. Whenever little things come up and trigger my shame, I default back into that wounded child part of me. And really, that wounded child part shows up whenever I want recognition, whenever I want to be recognized, whenever I want people to see my contribution and attribute it to me, because in some way that validates my
That's right.
being.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
and this is an interesting point. In the IFS world, the term is trailhead. So you can kind of think of the beginning of a trail before you kind of get into the forest. And it's interesting for you to say that, Neal, that it's whenever your shame is particularly triggered. And I'm assuming that's whenever you feel overlooked, unrecognized. Is that what it is?
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And also when I feel like I'm brushing up close to failure, when I'm not set up to win,
Mm.
uh, and I feel like it's gonna make me look bad, I default back into that type 3. Now I know that I am loved by God no matter what, no matter what I achieve, but I have to bring myself back to that truth.
Sure.
Well, Alison, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit about how you as a 3 have related to this wounded part of your part.
So what I would say is the wounded part shows up. The 3 part of me when it's wounded is kind of like an adolescent that's like I'm gonna kind of has this bravado internally. I don't know if I show it in real life, but that's like I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna show the world how hard I can hit this, serve this ball over the net, and that's actually not it's all about that part, that young desire to be prove that I'm
Yes.
worth, seeing, or that I can do this great. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't make it good. And then the wounded part comes out that says, "Oh, it's binary, right? I'm terrible. I'm a failure." And then I just want to hide my
Mm.
head in the sand, bury my head in the sand, move to that 9 wing, shut it down, give up, quit. And so what I've learned, what both of those feel wounded to me in a way, and I think both the more adolescent kind of I'm going to fake it till I make it heart that wants to just whack that ball as hard as I can, whatever I'm trying to do. But it's a little wild, it's not harnessed, self-led, spirit-led, self-led energy. The ball goes kind of wild. And every once in a while it might hit a great winner down the line, but for the most part, it's not. It's coming from that kind of a little bit of that trying too hard, that
Mm.
Yeah.
false energy. And then that triggers that shame of, I can't do it, I can't do anything, I'm a failure, I'll just
Mm.
hide I'll just hide in shame.
Mm.
And that's a very
Hmm.
painful dichotomy inside
Oh,
that
sure it is.
those wounds.
Let's talk a little bit about the idea of the beloved child. And this is the part of us, the spirit led, the spirit filled part of us. The Bible talks about this in a wide variety of ways, from the new self versus the old self, the flesh versus the spirit. These are all ways that the Bible is speaking to that there are various parts of us in which, the application of the gospel by faith in Jesus Christ, our faith working itself out in love, applies to leading our internal worlds ourselves. And so when we think of the type 3 and their beloved child, it's when the core longing is filled deeply by the truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
And I love the image for the type 3 of how the writer of Hebrews talks about that Jesus is the author and perfecter of the faith, meaning he has uniquely designed what that experience is going to be about, and he lived it. So he understands it completely. And a matter of fact, that is actually applied to us. In Romans chapter 11 says, hey, Paul says, if it's by works, it can no longer be about grace.
Mhm.
And so there's this idea for the type 3, a heart comes to rest, that there is no more condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Mhm.
The
Amen.
type 3 heart. So Beth, why don't you talk about how the gospel and the type 3 core longing?
Yeah. So just like Jeff said, this is the spirit-led self, which Alison really loved that part of your book and Boundaries for Your Soul. It ties so much of what we miss in IFS. Like, I just really appreciated that. But this part knows that it is free of shame, worthlessness, and failure because Christ finished the perfect work on our behalf. And under the beloved child self, but under its leadership, the type 3s can now rest, knowing that they do not need to earn his love or earn their position. They know they are simply loved for being right who they are.
Neal, when we brought up the idea of beloved child, a smile came over your face. Tell us what that experience is like when you really do sense that this is a healthier part of you. And, I had a pastor friend once tell me that we don't like God's glory and we don't like our own glory. We actually experience shame when we experience this sense of dignity and honor that God has uniquely given us. And the 3s invite us to something. And I think they can invite us to a very God-centered honor of who we are as people.
Well, and also, if we kind of take some of the lies that the wounded child might say, we want to also paint a picture of what the beloved child might say to yourself. And that's, I am not what I do. I am God's beloved child. Therefore, I am free to put down my achieving masks and be my true self. So Neal, kind of explain to us how this beloved part shows up for you and what that means.
Yes, I have been totally resonating with everything you've been saying. So to begin, I want to talk about how usually when I'm taken into that wounded child part of me, I view it as the spectrum where on this end, I have a very low self-esteem. When I'm triggered in shame, I dive into this end of the spectrum where I feel like I need to overcorrect by puffing up and proving to the world that I matter. And so this narrative of my wounded child is that I've been wronged by the world. People don't see the real me, and I'm going to prove them all wrong. That's the message that I preach to myself when I'm in my wounded child. But
Yep.
when I access the beloved child, I find that I'm on neither extremes of that spectrum, and I'm rather in the healthy middle, where I it kind of brings me to this point in the Gospels where Jesus, when he's baptized, the skies open up, the dove comes down, God's voice says, "This is my beloved child whom I love." And, at that point in the Gospels, Jesus didn't start his ministry. He didn't do anything
Good point.
to have God say that about him. And yet he is loved. And so if I try to put myself into that position where I start from a place of love, I'm not working for love. I'm not trying to prove people wrong. I'm not trying to overcorrect with my achievements and my accomplishments. Rather, I find when I'm accessing that beloved child that I'm starting from a place of joy. And just to bring it back to my book, Start from Joy, I feel like I'm not trying to prove the world wrong. Instead, I get to have fun and be lighthearted about it. And I feel like in my wounded child, I try to be on a pedestal above everyone else. But in my beloved child, we're all just on the same level, having a big party, having fun. And from that place of joy, that's where I create lasting change because I'm enjoying my work. I'm enjoying what I do. And I enjoy making the people around me better rather than feeling like I need to be above people. And that's when true positive change lasts.
Neil, I think so many threes will resonate with so much of what you said, but I loved that idea when moving from a place of joy, love, and assurance versus finding it at the expense of others or at the expense of yourself, because burnout's a possibility. If you're seeking it too hard, running over people could be it, where you're wanting to accomplish your goal. But your heart's at rest with people. Your heart's at rest with the world. Alison, it reminded me a little bit about that experience that you have whenever you're filled with shame, you're still writing this book, and you're searching for where is this beloved part of me, and what gets you there is, how can I help people? It's almost like a mindset shift of, okay, this is where I know the Spirit's going to help me. Tell us a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, it's really it flips me out of, I'm trying to win something to what actually matters to me. What am I actually trying to do? What do I care about? And it feels a little bit also like pulling in that forewing because it's also, that's coming to me more and more. It's the authenticity. I just want to be as true as I can be to my own story, to what God has given me, to the people that God has given me to serve and support. And that is where freedom lies. That's where that beloved child, and you feel it. It's just what you said now. I love that. But it's like all of a sudden I shift out of all that clatter between wanting to be somebody and feeling shame for that or feeling shame because I failed, and it's just this spaciousness that says, how do you show up every day the best of who I am, not the performance of who I am, but the best of who God made me to be. And it reminds me of that, the Eric Liddell in Chariots of Fire, where he says, I feel God's joy when I run. And he's being excellent, he's good at it, there's nothing wrong with that. But he's doing it because out of this place of like, this is what God made me to do. And I can do this and I get to help people. And oh my gosh, it's what you're saying. It's joy. This is the best. This is, thank you, Lord. I'm so grateful that I get to show up and just be the best that I can be, not to win anything, not to earn anything, but just to be me and get to do this work that reaches people and helps people. And then that fruit of the Spirit of joy. It is interesting. It is for me also joy. That's how I feel God's delight.
Yes.
Well, what I'd like to do next is we're going to go into the other 4 parts of EIP. And the first part is wings. Now, the idea of wings, a little bit different than how maybe people have heard about wings, is that we're not one or the other. Actually, we're both. We use both. And these wings can be both healthy and unhealthy when they're being lived out from the perspective of either our beloved or wounded. So there's a protective part of how they function for us. But there's also this spirit-led part of how this wing helps us as to live out our sense of calling and our design. So for the type 3s, their wings are type 2 and type 4. The type 2 part is highly relational, friendly, cheerful, energetic, talkative, and engaging. And when a 3's 2 part is misaligned, they're trying to protect their wounded child. And what that looks like in their behavior and their thoughts and feelings, they turn on the relational warmth to charm and to flatter so that they can connect with others to receive the affirmation, adoration, and attention that their wounded child is longing for. They may feel hurt and insecure when they're not needed. They may double down on their efforts to win people through people pleasing, through flattery, and looking for more ways to make people like them. They hide their own needs and emotions and focus on how to win appreciation, praise, applause, admiration through performance and staying in the spotlight. Beth, why don't you tell us about the type 3's type 2 wing under the leadership of the beloved child?
Yeah. So when we start to believe and trust in our identity in Christ, and our type 2 or your type 2 wing shows up, it's going to be led from that misaligned, unhealthy way that the wounded child is trying to protect into these really glorious parts. So the things you might notice is that you're going to instinctively know how to make others feel special, to be seen, to be cared for, and for them to know that they're supported, not just from achieving standpoints or excellence, but actual emotional friendship, compassion, support, and expressing care towards them. But you're also going to extend this love and this support to yourself first so that you can actually be selfless in extending the same care and affirmation to others. And then you're going to maintain appropriate boundaries by saying no to the things that are not your responsibility or not your things to achieve on the behalf of others. So Alison and Neal, how does your type 2 wing show up both in that misaligned and aligned formats, whether they're following the wounded or the beloved child?
For me, I can tell you I know I'm misaligned when those relationships become a to-do list. Right. And it's less about I want to connect to the person, and it's more about I got to make sure they're all happy. Check, 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 check.
100%. Same.
I hope my friends aren't listening. I'm so sorry. No, I mean, it's really subtle, but I know the difference. And I have to pause and go, wait a minute. Like, first of all, nobody wants to be a to-do list. Second of all, is this coming out of a desire to keep make sure they see me showing up, or is this coming out of I really care about this person and I want to make sure they're doing okay? Check my motives there. So that's a little bit for me how I noticed the misalignment.
Before I read More Than Your Number, I only saw myself as a 3-wing 4 and had this very stereotypical impression that I'm a 3-wing 4. I do not access that 2-wing.
Yeah.
But after I read More Than Your Number, I started realizing, oh man, the 2 shows up for me a lot. So for instance, the misaligned part of me, I really feel that 2-wing when I feel rejected, when I don't belong. And I try to achieve and people please in order to feel like I belong with the community. But then in that healthy side, I really do want people to shine as their best selves. And I do things in a way to, like, I help and I make myself of service in a way that builds them up. So like, for instance, around the house, like with my type 2 wife, Carly, I will cook dinner. I will do all the laundry and do all the dishes, make sure that house is clean, not because I'm trying to really do something for them and make sure that they see me as being a helper, but really because I want to give her space, because I see that, she was up a lot of the night with the baby and I want her to be her best self today.
So
It's interesting, Neal. There's in having close to 3 million people now having taken our assessment and gotten tons of feedback from the coaches who use our assessment, there are a lot of times that type 6s think that they're 2s, type 9s think that they're 2s. And so even 1s and sometimes even 3s, the 3-2 relationship sometimes it's difficult to differentiate. But there is this aspect that a 3, you are more than your 3-ness. There is a part of you that is very other-centered. I think of Paul's word, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, consider others better than yourselves. 3s, there is a part of your heart that considers other people better than yourself. And maybe it's those who are closest to you, your closest friends, your spouse, your family members, but that is a part of you. And when we do ourselves a disservice when we fail to see this part of our heart that really genuinely wants to connect and to help with people. And as Alison said earlier, usually that's when you'll find your most success and your most joy in living out your calling. Because as a 3, you're bringing people along with you.
It's interesting, the 2 and the 3 parts of me, because they're both quite prominent, can tango where the 2 part of me can be judgmental of the 3 part of me, and this should really be more about helping people.
Yes.
That can be painful, but what really is beautiful is they start to team up. And the 2 part of me begins through the spirit-led self as I slip into the 2 part of me reminds the 3 part of me, hey, let's hold hands here and really see how we can. And that again, that brings that joy, that fruit of the spirit, where we're trying to actually use some of this energy in a way that truly helps others, like you're saying, and they team up in a really powerful way, those 2 parts.
Yeah. Well, the image came to mind. So I was a place kicker in college, and you have to be really fast. I can't remember the exact moment, but it's less than a second from when the ball is snapped to when it actually gets kicked. And I'm actually was running up to the ball to kick it before the ball is even on the ground. And I am just trusting that at the right moment, that holder is going to put that down so I'm not Charlie Brown and Lucy. But there is a part, like, because there's always ambivalence with wings. I've noticed this with the Enneagram for a while. There's tension. I'm a 3 who's into myself, and I have a 2 part of me that is interested in others, but yet I have a 4 part of me that feels brings in shame and doesn't necessarily want to bring attention to self. And so just the design itself leads us to a place of I have to wrestle with God about who he made me to be.
It shows the tension that we hold within ourselves.
That's right.
And it brings the clarity to that tension, not to expose it in a negative way, but to expose it so we can grow in health.
So it's kind of like the movies, at the end of the movie where all of the pieces come together. There is a part of a 3 that's waiting for the 2 to show up, and the 2's waiting for the 3 to show up because together they can do something. Okay.
Amen.
Well, let's take a look at type 4, the other wing. So the type 4 for the type 3, a lot of type numbers here. The type 4 part of their hearts are more withdrawn, private, quiet, maybe even less energetic. This part of them focuses on achieving recognition and praise, but it's for their unique accomplishments and their special status. How am I different from other 3s? When this 4 wing shows up, it's trying to protect your wounded child. So you may struggle with tension between putting on a likable persona to charm and win others and admiration, but also demand authenticity and realness from them to be yourself.
That tension between the 3 and the 4 is so strong.
That's right. Sadly, 3s that are, kind of hang their hat on not having emotions, they actually may be very moody, temperamental, withdrawal. They actually may experience more self-doubt in regards to their ability. They demand that others see, praise, and admire their unique contributions, their notable accomplishments, and their profound creativity. Bethy, why don't you take this here and talk about when the 4 wing shows up for them, but under the beloved child's leadership?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, for them, they're going to start to see that when their heart is at rest, they're going to master and excel at their craft and skill with much more introspection and creativity. They're also going to be able to observe their emotional world and develop an ability to go deep within, to create emotional balance, vulnerability, genuineness, and that authenticity that everyone's looking for. And they feel self-assured and highly accomplished. They're intuitive, sensitive, self-aware, both at work and at home. And they bring that sense of their self to all of their life, which people are so blessed by. So Alison and Neal, share with us some of the misaligned part, or type 4 part of you, and some of the beloved part.
Yeah, well, I feel like I really resonate with that 4-wing because there's this deep need of my heart to be my authentic self. So, just to give an example of something that's just coming to mind that resonates with this, when I was a kid growing up, I'm a person of color, and growing up, kids didn't know how to place me. They were like, "What race are you? Are you black? Are you Hispanic?" And I'm like, "I'm brown." They didn't know how to place me, and because of that ambiguous nature, my race, my Indian heritage, became the butt of the joke. It was like something that they always joked about. It was a funny thing being Indian, and because of my 3-ness and wanting to belong and be liked, I would shapeshift, and I would make my ethnic heritage the butt of the joke, and that's how I fit in. But underneath that, I would always feel grief. And later on in my adult years, I would sit with that grief, and I'm like, what is that grief? That grief is me wanting to be my authentic self, to fully honor my Indian heritage and show up as 100% Indian male in America and be that authentic person. So I felt like this 4-wing really gives me that, it really speaks to that desire to be my authentic self. Now, in my healthy aligned part, I really honor that part of me. I really honor who I am, and I have no fear of showing up as my authentic self and bringing my uniqueness to the table, because I know that if I deprive people of my uniqueness, if I make myself the butt of the joke, then I'm taking something from the world. I'm not contributing my best to the world.
Neal, I appreciate you bringing up the issue in regards to race, because so I was adopted, but I'm actually half Mexican. I didn't find that out until I was 30 years old. But I've been reluctant to lay hold of that because I was raised in a white family. So, but the lens of the 6 says I'm not being loyal to my Mexican heritage by saying that I am Mexican, because I actually grew up in a white family. But I loved how you said, I'm going to show up as an Indian man in America, which is a very 3-way of kind of entering into embracing your race.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, it's a side conversation that's coming up more and more as we focus on our stories, particularly our racial and ethnic stories. And the Enneagram says something about it. It has a way of kind of integrating its way in how we experience our sense of race. Alison, do you have any thoughts about your 4-ness and this 4 part of your heart?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, Neal, you've talked about the 4 being more intuitive, and the 2, I'm the opposite. So the 2's been very prominent, and it's been newer for me to understand the 4 part of me. But where I'm resonating with it, I think where it snuck in the unhealthy way was I'm not special. I'm not, that, but where it has in the last few years, I feel like become such an asset, and the way that God uses it is again that I want to be true. I want to be. To me, it brings in that the opposite of deception or trying to create an image is what is true, and that there's such a freeing. And that is what makes us special too. That's also what gets us kind of what. But if I'm just me, there's a song we used to sing as a kid. I can't remember how it goes, but something about God just made me. But, and what does it mean to be me? And is that okay? And is that enough? And I don't know if it's special, but it is who I am. And maybe that's okay. And can I show up just as me, no more, no less? I think Amy Grant also had a song like that. And those songs stood out to me as a kid. Um, I wish I could remember the words, but they lingered. They were all along the lines of this. What would it mean just to be enough to be me? And so I think the more I lean into that belovedness of, whether I'm, the loudest person in the room, whether I'm the quietest person in the room, whether I'm a woman who loves to work and sometimes doesn't get the dinner on the table on time because I'm too, but it's like my husband's like, man, you're like really absorbed in your work right now, and it's 6:45, and whatever it
It's so funny.
is that just embracing that there's trueness in that, and that's how God made, and just learning to kind of give myself permission to I think I'm not sure if I'm getting that right, because that 4-1 is still a little bit and then the second
Mhm.
thing I'll say is learning the emotional side. I think, Neil, you talked about this at the beginning, that for me I was so cut off from my emotions really until my 30s, and giving myself that spaciousness to check in. What is really going on inside of me? What am I really feeling? What is really that's been, I think, part of the reason we teach this as threes that are in therapeutic professions is, you teach what's been really hard for you to learn, right? If it's easy,
Absolutely.
how do you teach what you just intuitively know, right? And so it's like those practices have just been life changing, to set side a way to really check in with myself, to get quiet, to log off. It's hard for
Yes.
me to log off and get quiet and listen, but man, is it fruitful as I've been able to do it.
Great. Well, next we're going to talk about paths. These are dealing with the lines. And once again, these paths can function, both paths can function healthy and unhealthy ways when they are coming from either our wounded or beloved child.
Mhm.
Well, for the type 3, that means for type 3s, they move to type 9 and to type 6. Now, Enneagram 101, I just want to remind you, like, it's going to teach a stress path and a growth path, but we're trying for you to see that these function as part of you. They're much fuller than just either or. They're both and it depends on if they're operating out of the protective nature for the wounded child or the spirit-led part of us, the beloved child. Beth, why don't you tell us? Let's first talk about the type 9 path.
Yeah. All right. So for the type threes, the type 9 part of their heart is warm, loving, caring, receptive. It focuses on affirming, encouraging, and supporting others. But to keep the peace, and they're not going to want their relationships to be disrupted. So they're going to merge and to go along to get along, accommodate other people's agendas, and can lose themselves in the process. And it supports their main type by encouraging rest. And so what we want the type threes to move into that beloved self is, how can you learn to be? How can you not be a human doing, but a human being? And that 9 space gives you that ability to relax, to enjoy serenity, to be able just to look around and be in the actual moment, just to be who you are and not to always have to achieve. So with that, for you guys, what does it look like when your misaligned part shows up and you're losing yourself, accommodating, going along to get along, trying not to upset anyone? And then what is it like when your beloved part shows up, where you can just be and embrace like all that's happening and receive people, and you don't have to be the top one. You can actually be amongst everyone.
Okay, so first off, I just want to say thank you for that explanation that, Enneagram 101 kind of teaches you the stress path and the growth path. And we've always kind of been conditioned with that idea that if you are leaning into your 9 self, that's just bad. You should avoid any characteristics of a 9. And that's how I approached when I first learned about the Enneagram, how I've approached my 9 self. But like I said earlier in this conversation, I really resonate with that 9 part of me, particularly where it comes to rest.
Yeah.
I find that I'm able to approach my work with a lightheartedness. And today I have some pretty strict boundaries around what my working time and my off work time. Uh, and also boundaries around my rest. Like, I do not really struggle with overwork.
Mm.
That much because once a certain time of the day comes, I'm like, all right, it's time to rest. It's time to play. It's time for me to be present with my son, Jude. That's where that 9 part of me, the healthy side, shows up. And I really resonate with that part of me. But then that misaligned part of me, I find that it shows up whenever I'm in tension with someone, or if someone has an idea that's contrary to mine, I find that instead of standing up for my point and asserting my belief, I say a statement to kind of cool the tension. I say, well, we don't have to do it this way. Or,
Right.
it doesn't matter if we do it this way or not. Or I'm willing to do whatever you want.
Mhm.
It's a very a people pleasing
Yes.
trying to think. I'm trying to
I don't know
cool
what
down
you're
the
talking
tension.
about. I've never said those things.
Yeah, in my mind, I know what I want, but externally, it comes out as I'm willing to do whatever.
Right. And
Yeah.
also, one thing I forgot to mention was the need to check out. The 3s are so overworked. They have so many goals. It's exhausting to be under that constant stress of achieving, that they kind of get to this place where they just want to numb out, check out. And that could be through any variety of things. It could be eating, it could be shopping, it could be video games, like whatever it is that can help the 3 to numb out, check out, disassociate from the stress. Now, they're usually not going to show that in front of everyone. Usually what they'll do is actually stay busy, or it looks like they're busy, and yet they're really not busy, because they're needing that rest, but they don't want anyone to see that they're checking out. So anyway,
And
that's another form
This
of
conversation is super important because there is a rest that comes out of woundedness, and there is
yes.
a rest that comes out of beloved.
That's good.
Mm.
That's
And
good.
and sometimes it can't just be it's coming out of something, and usually those who are closest to us recognize it. There's a sense to where, as a type 6, that with a racing mind, I've got to shut this thing down, that can be reactive and mindless and intentional and restorative.
right.
And I believe that the same can be true for the type 3, where
Yeah, absolutely.
resting is not just something to be checked off the list.
Right.
I rested better than anyone else.
It's a and that's why I use this with 3s, even though other types might not feel it as much, or they might actually kind of almost chuckle at it. But every time I say it to a 3, they are like, yes. When I say, stop being a human doing and be a human being, like to them, it totally resonates. Now, how they need to do that, that's like a whole nother learning curve, but that helps them to at least capture this vision of, what does it mean just to be, and to be in the moment, to be me, and to rest in who I am? And again, like you said, that could be even the same ways that you were trying to check out. It could almost be the same ways, but you're doing it from a totally different angle. Your beloved child is leading that part, and you're able to engage in a whole different and healthier way. Alison, what about you?
Yeah, I love, again, the expansion of that 9, because for me, it always was produce, check out. And it wasn't conscious or intentional, and that even through my teen years, and my big one was TV, it's just, um, and what I've learned, 2 things. One is the intentionality, just as you're saying, Jeff, where sometimes it's like I can't get myself there. So I'm going to strategically choose a show to watch with mindfulness to help bring, just maybe it connects to an emotion that I need to connect to. It's going to get me back to center so that then I can kind of calm the nervous system. So I might even mindfully give myself, or the other thing I'll do is give myself a very light project. So there's the part of me that's still like I'm getting something done, but I'm intentionally doing it in a way to help myself decompress. Because then I am moving toward rest. There's a healthy way versus just a shut it down, but not really get access to that experience of what it feels like to calm my nervous system, slow my mind, get to the place of being. Sometimes it's a process for me. And then the other thing I've learned to teach myself is hobbies are, hobbies that, like, my husband and I figured out a couple hobbies that we both enjoy. We'll go cross country skiing in the winter. We'll hike, we'll walk, where we're doing something. And what I've learned is that the part of me that wants to work, it goes on the back burner. In IFS, we talk about letting that part, it's still there. It's simmering on the stove. And actually you're going to come back and be more fresh and more creative. So I kind of negotiate with myself, and I'm also doing something that's healthy for my body. And so it's still a little bit of doing, it's still a little bit of, but I have a sense of, but I am then able to relax into it and get the benefits of it. So to try to just tell myself, you have to go be, and that, but it's like, how do I do that in a way that the part of me, the 3 part of me that's like, how is this getting us somewhere? Is like, actually, it is. It actually is going to make us healthier in the long run. I get that buy-in.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I want people to hear, we're not trying to force you into these other parts and be them. Like, we're not telling you should be a 9. We're saying, no, God created you to be a beautiful, healthy 3 that accesses these other parts of you in healthy ways, but they are not your main type. They bring attributes to you. So you're not trying to be a type 9, but how does the type 9, how can it serve the 3? And the 3 really wants to go, go, go. And there's, in a lot of ways, nothing wrong with that if it's being spirit-led. So for you, it could be, hey, I want to go skiing. I want to actually physically do something as I rest and rejuvenate from work. Whereas me, a type 9, I want to go sit by a river and watch my family fly fish and kind of do absolutely nothing but smell a campfire. And so,
and I want to go do
close
that
to what
with
you've
you.
created on our patio.
She wants to go and do that with me.
I want to go do that with you, Beth, because if I was with you, I could do it, right? That would be lovely. If I was by myself, I'd figure out something to do, right? So that's where the 9, you're right, it brings both a vision, but also just that connection of, I love my 9 friends. It's like, oh yeah, I get this. I feel this with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, love that.
When we were doing our Becoming Us material regarding couples and coupling up, I married a 9 for a reason. Her body is like a throttle, in the sense that, like, if I overwhelm her, her body will shut down and, like, okay, I guess I'm done now.
Push on the brakes.
But
I'm done.
It's a natural invitation for me to be able to slow down. But her presence is such a gift in helping me to be able to do that.
Well, let's enter into the 6 space. So the 6 part of you, and
Which is the best part of you.
Exactly.
Like I just,
Bias.
Yeah. And so the 6 part of your heart, we really want to honor it because it's trying to help you as a type 3. And though it can do it in ways that are healthy and not so healthy, so it's going to anticipate all the circumstances that could go wrong. And it's constantly in the lookout. It's planning, it's preparing for any possible threats or mishaps or things that are going to expose, who you are. So it's really helping the 3 in the 3 space. But it's also so reliable. It's faithful. It's courageous. It can express frustrations, dissatisfactions, has a lot of self-doubt because it's thinking of all the ways things could go wrong or could happen.
yeah, we're moving on.
Am I stepping in your kitchen? And this produces a lot of anxiety. So it brings confusion, and it also causes the 3 to feel this need to search out for guidance and support from others, which can be really kind of confusing for the type 3 because they usually lead with such confidence and decisiveness. And so to feel this sense of, wait, I'm confused, I have self-doubt, I need to go look for answers, that almost feels being exposed as if they're not good enough. But when the beloved child part of your heart as a type 6 leads out, it understands that you have these anxieties and insecurities, but you bring it to God, trusting that He is going to fully care for you, give you clarity, courage, support, and that it's okay to be humble and ask for guidance from others, that it doesn't diminish you. But it also puts aside this competitive part of your heart to be seen as the best one. And it's just like what you were saying, Alison, it wants to be cooperative, committed, passionate, to be a team player, to see another person's needs and to move in and to faithfully and lovingly support them. So with that, tell us a little bit about how the type 6 shows up in a wounded and beloved space for you guys.
I feel like my type 6 really shows up a lot in relationships. So whenever I feel like I've possibly wronged someone, if I've hurt someone, if I haven't done my best or showed up my best for someone, this anxiety spiral starts in my heart. And one thing that I do whenever I quickly notice when I'm in that 6 space, and my instinct is to want to reach out whenever I'm in that 6 part, to reach out to the person to check if we're okay, and all of that. But one thing that I do to kind of bring myself out of that is I ask myself, what is one wise step I could take in this moment to calm down this anxiety? Because in my anxiety, I kind of rush to do things to try to save the day. That's how I see my 3 and my 6 working in tandem. But I really, I love how you said that 6 part is there to really protect you. I want to access the goodness of that fear that I have and turn it into wisdom. So I ask myself, what is one wise step that I can take now?
Alison, what about you?
I think the 6, that was another key piece of realizing that I truly was a 3, is recognizing, that relationship with the 6 is so important to me. And I think I've always had it kind of over here, like, I don't know what to make of that, because it might slow me. If I acknowledge, it'll slow me down. If I have to ask for help, it'll slow me down. If I have to collaborate, it'll slow me down. It's like the efficiency part of me is like, that feels inefficient.
Yes.
But I
I
will
totally
say,
resonate with that.
I will say that I have learned that's been one of the most fun growth areas for me, of just even recently, just the other day, I was really, I can feel, because of the 2-3 combo, I can feel like an eternal need meter. That's what it feels like to me. I'm just the go-to. What do we, and I can do a lot of it, and I can't, but I get exhausted. And I looked at my summer schedule and I was like, I'm doing all of this. Literally, and so I've started, where do I need help? Where do I ask for help? How can I go do it? So it's not even just helping others. It's also, I think, the 6s that I know just excel at kind of creating these systems, creating networks. And that has become so enticing to me. I'm like, oh, I want to learn that. I want more of that. And it's starting to come. I'll be like, I could pull in this person. I could pull in this person. I could,
Yeah.
and then the more we bring together, the more, the better it is for everybody.
Well, I love that you said that, because me being a 9, and I'm also connected to 6, and I'm married to a 6, and
Yes.
I have a lot of 6s in my life. Jeff will be like, because I'm like overwhelmed or whatever's going on. And he's like, why don't you just ask, for help, or call so-and-so, or do this? And I'm like, 1, I didn't even think about it.
Exactly.
And 2, if I think about it, there is this part of me that feels maybe a sense of shame or inadequacy, or, well, what if I call them and ask for help? Wouldn't they be like, why are you, like, can you not do this? But, and of course the person would never be that way. But there's this, and like you said, well, is that efficient or is that not efficient? If I ask someone to help, are they going to be as fast as I want them to be, or are they going to hold me up? So there's a lot of competing thoughts, but I see the 6s do this effortlessly. And now, of course, there's the strengths and the negatives for it, but I love watching how gifted they are to just ask questions, to ask for help, to seek networks. And it really can help us 9s and 3s if we'll access that.
Alison, does this resonate with you? That I feel like the aligned 6 and the aligned 9 part of me, it slows me down in the best ways. Like, I've learned, like, threes, they hate to be slowed down, but I've learned to see that healthy 9 of me as slowing me down to be present in
That's
the
right.
moment now. And then the healthy side of the 6 of me is making me wiser so that my
That's right.
next step is an action of wisdom. Yeah.
Something that we learned through Boundaries for Your Soul, Allison, it is interesting to hear the both of you talk about how your approach to these parts of your heart.
Mhm.
So there's another part of you that says, this will slow me down, it's inefficient, versus extending curiosity and kindness to these parts. And like, oh no, you're actually here to try to help me. You're a resource to slow me down so that I can actually become something better, which is so crucial. For our listeners and our viewers to recognize that you have feelings, you have interpretations of these parts of your heart. And some of that could be yours. Some of it could come from family of origin. Like, hey, I don't like that sensitive part of your heart. Or maybe parents kind of, maybe you had a 3-parent who coached you in being independent and efficient and not asking people. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why we have the feelings and thoughts and beliefs about these various parts of us. But, remember, it's, I think of the biblical command, do not fear, for I am with you. That fear is a longing for presence, and we get to mirror God's kindness, compassion, and love to the various parts of our hearts. So all that God is for us, we get to bring and apply all of those benefits to ourselves to the various parts of
It goes
us.
along with the next part we want to talk about, which is the bus.
Great. Let's talk about the
Okay.
bus.
Well, that was kind of your spot, but I'll take it if you
I
will
didn't
take
know
it.
it was my spot. Okay, yeah.
But so the bus analogy, which we learned from Alison's book, Boundaries for Your Soul, has been so impactful for us because really, think of ourselves as a bus. Well, someone's got to drive the bus. And we definitely want our beloved child or spirit-led self to be driving this bus because they're aligned with the truth of the gospel. But when our beloved child is asleep at the back of the bus, well, the bus is still going. So the wounded child and its parts are trying its best to drive this bus and stay on, the road. But I mean, think of a child trying to drive a big bus. Those strategies do not keep the wheels on the right path. And we keep falling into same kind of pits time and time again because the wounded part of our heart is ill-equipped. And so we want to have our beloved child to awaken, to get back into the driver's seat. And that's when we preach the gospel back to ourselves, to remind ourselves of who we are and whose we are, so that beloved child can bring the good news back to all the parts of our heart and lead it into a safe, more trusting place. And so with that, I would love just to kind of hear from you guys on how you see yourself using EIP moving forward in helping that beloved child to guide the rest of your parts.
I love how you refer to it's the beloved child. It's still that child within. Jesus said, "Let the children come," right, and become like this child. And so there's this sense of what I love. The image that came to mind of the bus. I love the bus metaphor. Is just that the ordering of all the parts are there. They're still there. They're still on the bus. The adolescent 3 part and the hurting 2 part and they're all there, but they're cared for. They're being led well. There's some order to it. They're all in the right seat. You know what I mean? And the bus is moving. And each one is getting the care that they need. And one of the things in IFS, there's this exercise called the path exercise where, and the beautiful thing about God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus, the Trinity coming in is sometimes I'll say, okay, this part of me needs to stay focused on it. But guess what? God is present everywhere. So God can go take care of those parts in the back of the bus that are hurting.
Yeah.
even as I can continue to take charge of what I can take charge of, right? They're never alone. Those parts of us are never alone. They're contained in this space where God lives with all the parts of us.
Absolutely. Neal?
In our book, Start From Joy, we talk about the difference between playing it safe and feeling safe to play. And playing it safe is when you move through life with your guard up, your walls up. You have to try to control everything to just meet the demands of life. You just live hyper vigilant. And that's when I feel like I'm in that misaligned part of myself, that wounded child. But feeling safe to play is totally the beloved child. When you're in the presence of a loving parent, you know that they're close by. You know that if you fall, they're going to come and tend to you. They're going to care for you. You're going to be back on your feet quicker. And it's when you're in that safe place that you feel absolutely free to be yourself. You feel free to risk, to adventure, to go and build something, to do something. Feeling safe to play is where I feel like true joy comes from. And when I read More Than Your Number and I read about the beloved child and the wounded child, the beloved child is that part of me that feels safe to play. And I always remind myself of that when I try to access these healthy parts of me. Does this part of me, does it reap the fruit of joy? Does it feel safe to play? Play is anything you do just simply for the enjoyment of it. And when I'm in that wounded child part of me, I'm able to see now that I'm not doing something just to enjoy it. I'm doing something to make something of myself in the world, to prove that I matter, to get another gold star, a medal, to put myself on a pedestal above people. But when I'm in that beloved child part of me, I'm playing. I have joy. And that's when I make true lasting change in the world. So that's how I really use EIP to change my approach to my contribution to the world, to change my life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you said that. And people are probably like, how did you read, More Than Your Number? Well, he's our chief marketing officer. So he has an early copy, but you can pre-order it. And the great thing about having that book come to you in September is at the back half of the book, we're going to lay out your EIP very clearly so you can reference back to it time and time again. And you can really start to pave this path forward in a healthy way to get that beloved child back into the driver's seat of the bus.
Well, we want to thank you both. This has been spectacular. What a joy. You two have been a gift to our lives. You continue to be a gift. And now we're so grateful that our audience gets to hear from you as well. So if you've been listening or if you've been watching, and please be sure to share the episode with the type 3s in your life. What we did today is coaching, walking people through their EIPs, and we'd love for you to personally experience this. You can do so by connecting with one of our certified Enneagram coaches. You can find a coach that fits you best at myenneagramcoach.com. That's myenneagramcoach.com. And you can pre-order our new book, which is already out on digital bookstores, More Than Your Number. Be sure to join us next week where we're going to be talking through the Type 4's EIP.
And as always, remember that the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It is the gospel that transforms us.